Your path is blocked. To unlock it, you must feed the spirit that will carry your destiny. This spirit is hungry, and it eats only one thing: pleasure. Ifeanyi frowned, confused. I don't understand. Baba's eyes gleamed. You must lie with women. Not one, not 10, but many. 50 women, in less than 2 weeks. The word slammed into Ifeanyi like a blow. He blinked rapidly, unsure if he had heard correctly. 50 women. Another day. Another job application. Another silence in return. Ifeanyi turned slowly on his bed, the wooden frame creaking under his weight. His phone sat on the stool by the bed, charging from a wire that had been patched with tape in 3 different places. The screen lit up with a notification. He reached for it lazily, already knowing what it would say. Thank you for your application. Unfortunately. He dropped the phone back on the stool and laughed. Not the laughter of someone amused, but the hollow, bitter laugh of a man who had become too familiar with disappointment. It had been 6 years since he graduated from the university. 6 years of searching, hoping, trying, and failing. 6 years of telling himself that tomorrow would be better. But tomorrow always came empty-handed. At 31, Ifeanyi's life felt like a cruel joke. He had imagined himself working in a multinational company by now, wearing crisp suits, living in a modest but decent apartment, perhaps even married with 1 or 2 children running around. Instead, he was still living in his parents' house, jobless, broke, and with no prospects in sight. His classmates had moved on. Some were working in banks, some had started businesses, others had relocated abroad. Even those who once looked up to him in school now had families, cars, and houses. But Ifeanyi, he had nothing to show for his years of study, nothing to prove that the sacrifices his parents made for his education had been worth it. His father, a retired civil servant, spent most of his days sitting in the veranda, reading old newspapers and complaining about the government. His mother sold foodstuffs in the market, her once straight back now bent from years of carrying baskets heavier than her body should have allowed. They gave Ifeanyi food and shelter, yes, but they could not give him dignity. He had once been the pride of the family. Our graduate, his father would say proudly to neighbors. Our hope. The one who will lift this family. Those words had been like fuel to him back then. But now, the words had become like a curse. People still asked after him, but the tone had changed. Curiosity had replaced admiration. Pity had replaced respect. And the woman he thought would stand by him through it all. Gone. 2 years ago, his girlfriend, Amoka, had ended their relationship. He could still remember the way she looked at him that evening, her face a mixture of sadness and resolve. Ifeanyi, I can't do this anymore. I have needs. I have dreams. And love is not enough. Her words had cut him deeply. He had tried to reason with her, tried to remind her of all the promises they had made to each other. But she was unmoved. I need someone who can take care of me. I can't suffer with you forever, she had said. And just like that, she was gone. She found someone else shortly after, a banker who drove a Toyota Camry and had an apartment of his own. The rejection had nearly destroyed him. It wasn't just about losing her, it was about what her leaving symbolized. It was confirmation that he had failed, that he had nothing to offer, that he was not enough. Now, sitting on his creaking bed, Ifeanyi rubbed his face with both hands and sighed. He was tired. Tired of trying, tired of waiting, tired of hoping. Tired of being a failure. His phone buzzed again. Another rejection email. He didn't even bother to open it this time. He just placed the phone face down and closed his eyes. For a moment, he allowed himself to dream, to imagine what it would feel like to have money. To walk into a car dealership and point at a car without asking for the price. To walk into a boutique and buy clothes without calculating what would remain in his account. To take his mother to the hospital and pay the bills without borrowing. To walk into a restaurant with a mocha, or someone like her, and order the most expensive dish without fear. He opened his eyes. The dream vanished as quickly as it came. Reality stood before him, harsh and unyielding. Some nights, when the silence became unbearable, he would lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering if there was something wrong with him. Maybe he wasn't meant for success. Maybe he was destined to be ordinary, forgotten. But deep down, another voice whispered, "You deserve more. You were made for more." That morning, he stepped outside to buy bread from the corner store. The air was hot already, the sun unforgiving, and the street was alive with noise. Hawkers shouted, children ran barefoot across the dusty road, and motorcycles weaved dangerously between cars. As he stood waiting for his change, something unusual happened. He heard it first, the low hum of an engine, smooth and expensive, not like the rickety cars that usually pass through the neighborhood. Heads turned even before the car came into view. Then it appeared, a gleaming black Range Rover with tinted windows, polished to perfection. The car slowed and stopped right in front of him. The driver's window rolled down, and Ifoni's heart skipped a beat. It was a Jack. His old friend. His classmate. The boy who once borrowed pens from him in school. The one who used to sit beside him in class, sharing groundnuts during boring lectures. The one who, during their final year, had whispered about not even knowing how he would pay for his project. But now he looked different. Very different. Jack smiled broadly, his white teeth gleaming. His wrist glittered with a gold watch, the kind that caught the sun and forced people to look. His shirt was designer, his perfume so strong that it reached Ifoni even before he stepped out of the car. "Ifoni!" Jack shouted, opening his arms wide. He stepped out with the ease of a king, drawing stares from every corner of the street. Children pointed at the Range Rover, whispering. Two young women slowed their walk, their eyes fixed on him. Even the man selling bread stood frozen, the change forgotten in his hand. Jack embraced Ifoni tightly, slapping his back in excitement. "My brother. See you. You haven't changed much, oh. But me, life has changed me." Ifoni forced a smile, his throat dry. Standing beside Jack was like standing in the shadow of a mountain. For the first time in years, he felt invisible, insignificant. Jack pulled back, adjusting his watch, then dangled his car keys like a trophy. "Come, let me buy you lunch. It's been too long." Before Ifoni could respond, Jack was already walking back to the car, opening the passenger door for him like a chauffeur. The scent of leather seats and imported cologne filled his nostrils as he stepped in. As the Range Rover purred to life and rolled smoothly away from the dusty street, Ifoni glanced through the window. The faces of the neighbors, the hawkers, even the children, were pressed with awe and envy. All eyes followed the car until it disappeared from sight. Inside, Jack grinned, tapping Ifoni's shoulder. "My brother, life's sweet, oh. You go chop well today." And just like that, without warning, the door to Ifoni's destiny opened. The door that would lead him into a world he had only heard whispers about. A world that promised everything he ever wanted, and demanded more than he could ever imagine. The restaurant was not the kind Ifoni was used to. In fact, he had never stepped foot inside one like this before. It sat in the heart of town, its glass walls polished until they gleamed, the doors opened by a uniformed attendant who bowed slightly as Jack led him inside. The blast of cool air from the air conditioner wrapped around him, chasing away the heat of the sun and the dust of the streets he had walked all his life. Ifoni hesitated as he stepped in, his worn sandals squeaking faintly against the tiled floor. Everything felt out of place, the sparkling chandeliers, the muted jazz music floating in the background, the scent of grilled meat and wine that hung in the air. He glanced at his clothes, a simple shirt and trousers that had faded from too many washes. He felt underdressed, almost naked, in a place where men wore tailored suits and women dripped in jewelry. His instinct told him to turn back, to flee before someone asked him what he was doing there. But Ejike was already walking confidently to a corner table, waving at a waiter as if he owned the place. Heads turned, not at Ifeanyi, but at Ejike, the man who seemed to carry wealth like a crown. "Sit, my brother," Ejike said, pulling out a chair. "You are my guest today. Eat without fear. Whatever you want, just order." Ifeanyi lowered himself slowly into the chair, still uncertain if he belonged. A waiter appeared almost immediately, pen poised over a pad. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. What will you have?" Ejike didn't look at the menu. "Bring me grilled chicken, fried rice, salad, and that cold champagne. The one in the gold bottle." He glanced at Ifeanyi and grinned. "And for him, bring the same. He needs to taste enjoyment today." The waiter nodded and disappeared. Ifeanyi cleared his throat. "Ejike, this place, it's expensive, abi." Ejike leaned back, laughing. "Expensive? My brother, nothing is expensive when you have money. That word, expensive, is only for poor men. For us, it does not exist." Ifeanyi smiled faintly, but inside, his chest tightened. He wanted to believe those words. He wanted to live them. But they felt like a dream he could never touch. Ejike studied him for a moment, his grin softening. "You haven't changed much. Still the quiet one. Still humble. But I can see it in your eyes, you are tired. Life hasn't been fair to you." The words stung because they were true. "Yes," Ifeanyi admitted softly. "I'm tired, Ejike. 6 years now, I've been looking for work. Nothing. Everywhere I go, they tell me to bring connection, to know someone inside. I've written countless applications, and all I get are rejection letters. My parents, they are still struggling. And Amoka, she left me. She said I had nothing to offer her." He looked down, ashamed to even speak the words aloud. Ejike reached across the table and clapped his hand on Ifeanyi's shoulder. "Forget her. Women will always follow money. You think she won't come running when she hears how rich you've become? My brother, you need to stop suffering. You need to open your eyes." Ifeanyi looked up slowly. "Open my eyes? How?" The waiter returned then, carrying a tray. He placed plates of steaming food before them, set down 2 glasses, and poured the champagne with a flourish. The golden liquid bubbled and fizzed, catching the light of the chandelier. Ejike raised his glass. "To old friends," he said, clinking it against Ifeanyi's. Ifeanyi sipped cautiously. The drink was smooth, richer than anything he had ever tasted. For a moment, he allowed himself to enjoy it, to savor the food that melted in his mouth, the cold fizz of the champagne that seemed to wash away his worries. But the question remained, burning inside him. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Ejike, tell me the truth. How did you make it? Back in school, you didn't even know how you would pay for your project. And now, look at you. Cars, clothes, houses. How?" Ejike wiped his mouth slowly with a napkin, smiling in a way that sent a shiver down Ifeanyi's spine. "Ifeanyi, this world doesn't reward the honest. You can work hard from now till you die and still remain broke. But if you want to live, if you want to enjoy, you have to do what others fear. You have to do what they won't talk about openly." Ifeanyi's eyes narrowed. "You mean, fraud?" Ejike chuckled softly, tapping the table with his finger. "Fraud? Yahoo. Whatever name you want to give it. That is the way now. Look around you, all these boys driving Benz and Range Rover, you think they are working in banks. No, my brother. They are smart. They know the game. They know how to collect money from those who have too much of it." The words hit Ifeanyi like a wave. He had heard of Yahoo boys, of course. Who hadn't? Stories filled the news of young men duping foreigners online, of sudden wealth, of parties and cars. But he had always dismissed it, always told himself he was above that. His Christian upbringing, his father's constant warnings about honesty and hard work, they had kept him away. But sitting here, across from a Jack, with the taste of champagne still fresh on his tongue, those moral lessons felt weak. Empty. He whispered, almost to himself, but it's wrong. Jack leaned in closer, his voice firm. Wrong. Tell me, is it wrong for you to feed your mother? To take your father to the hospital? To marry the woman you love? The world doesn't care how you get the money. All that matters is that you have it. Nobody respects a poor man, if funny. Nobody. The truth of the words sank deep into him. He thought of his father, sitting with old newspapers, powerless. He thought of his mother's bent back, her hands rough from years of selling food in the market. He thought of Amoka, smiling in another man's car. His chest tightened. He felt anger. He felt shame. He felt desperation. Finally, he looked Jack straight in the eyes. Teach me. Teach me how to do it. I'll do anything. I can't live like this anymore. Jack studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, a wide grin spread across his face. That's the spirit. But if funny, don't rush. This life is not for the faint-hearted. When I ask you if you're ready to do anything, I mean anything. Are you sure? Ifani nodded without hesitation. I'm sure. Jack leaned back in his chair, sipping his champagne. Good. Then your life is about to change. From today, forget suffering. Forget shame. You will never beg again. Ifani's hands trembled slightly as he lifted his glass once more. He wasn't sure if it was excitement or fear running through his veins. He clinked it against Jack's again, forcing a smile. To new beginnings. And as the golden champagne slid down his throat, Ifani had no idea how much he had just given away. That night, Ifani could not sleep. The conversation with Jack replayed in his head like a song stuck on repeat. The laughter, the glint in Jack's eyes, the careless way he spoke about money, as if it was air, as if it was something you could pluck from the sky if only you knew where to stretch your hand. This is the way, Ifani. Forget all those job applications. This is where the real money is. He had gone home dizzy, his body present in his parents' small bungalow but his mind trapped in Jack's Range Rover. His mother noticed his silence at dinner, but she said nothing. She was used to her son drifting into long spells of thought. She did not know that this time, those thoughts were steering him toward a path she would never have prayed for. The next day, Jack picked him up. Today, I'll show you small. Just small, Jack said as he adjusted the steering wheel. He was dressed in a designer polo shirt that clung to his chest like it had been sewn on him, his wrist heavy with a Rolex that caught the sun and stabbed Ifani's eyes. They drove into town, past the struggling market women, past the Okada men shouting for passengers, past the row of hungry-faced boys who stood at street corners with nothing to do. Ifani thought of them and wondered if they, too, had old friends like Jack, friends who could open doors into another life. Jack parked in front of a large duplex painted cream and wine. From the outside, it looked like any other middle-class home. But once inside, Ifani's jaw nearly dropped. There were computers everywhere, on the glass table, on the brown leather sofa, even on the tiled floor. 6 young men sat in front of glowing screens, their fingers moving quickly, their faces intense. Some wore headsets, speaking in thick American or British accents. Others typed long messages, pausing now and then to grin at the replies on their screens. Dollar bills littered one corner of the room, bundled casually with rubber bands as if they were worthless scraps of paper. A bottle of champagne sat half open on the dining table. The air smelled of fried chicken, perfume, and cigarette smoke. Welcome to the office, Ejak said with a smirk. This is where destinies change. Ifeanyi swallowed hard. His legs felt weak. He had heard of Yahoo boys before, everyone had, but to see them like this, to see it with his own eyes, was something else entirely. Ejak clapped his hand on his shoulder. Relax. Nobody is killing anybody here. It's just the white people's money. They have too much. We take small from them. Sit down. That day, Ejak explained everything. He showed Ifeanyi how to create fake profiles, stealing pictures from Facebook, Instagram, even modeling websites. How to study the language of love letters, how to flatter strangers, how to pretend to be a lonely widower in Texas or a soldier stuck in Afghanistan. Emotions, Ifeanyi. That's the key. Once you hook their emotions, their money will follow. Ejak laughed when Ifeanyi flinched at some of the messages. You still dey fear. You think all those big men you admire got rich from clean hands. Forget that thing. The world doesn't reward honesty. You have to take what you want. By the time the sun dipped behind the roofs, Ifeanyi's head was pounding. He went home that evening with a small laptop Ejak pressed into his hands, and a head full of instructions. The days that followed blurred into each other. Ifeanyi locked himself in his room, sweating over the glowing screen, typing messages to strangers in faraway lands. At first, it felt awkward. His conscience pricked him each time he wrote a lie. Sometimes he paused halfway through a sentence and shut the laptop angrily, as if slamming the lid could silence the guilt rising in his chest. But then he remembered Ejak's car. The Rolex. The crisp dollar bills. His ex-girlfriend's mocking words. His parents' weary faces. Slowly, he forced himself to continue. He built characters from scratch, a widowed doctor, a grieving soldier, a businessman searching for love. He stole photos of smiling men from the internet and attached their names to his stories. He spent hours learning accents, imitating Ejak's tips, practicing over and over until his tongue could twist itself into a believable imitation of an American drawl. Still, the money didn't come. Weeks turned into months. His inbox was full of conversations but empty of results. The women he chatted with seemed interested at first, but when the topic of money arose, they disappeared like smoke. Each failure tightened the knot of frustration in his chest. He watched Ejak and the others cash out thousands of dollars in a single night, while he had nothing. One night, after yet another failed attempt, Ifeanyi slammed his fist on the table so hard that his mother rushed in from the living room. Ifeanyi, what is it? She asked, alarmed. He forced a smile. Nothing, Mama. Just tired. But inside, he was boiling. He hated the laptop. He hated the strangers who refused to believe his lies. Most of all, he hated himself, for being weak, for being left behind, for believing, after all these years, that hard work alone could save him. 3 months later, Ejak found him sulking outside a beer parlor. You look like someone stole your shadow, Ejak said, sliding into the seat beside him. What's the problem? Ifeanyi sighed. His voice cracked. I've been trying, Ejak. For months. Nothing works. Maybe I'm not cut out for this thing. Ejak chuckled, sipping his drink. You think it's that easy? You think I started yesterday and became who I am today? No. This life requires sacrifice. The game doesn't bless everyone equally. Some of us need to go deeper. Ifeanyi frowned. Deeper? What do you mean? Ejak leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. I asked you before, and I'll ask you again. Are you really willing to do anything for money? The words sent a chill down Ifeanyi's spine. He remembered that first day in the Range Rover, the way Ejak had asked the same question with that same piercing look. At the time, he had said yes without thinking, driven by hunger and envy. But now, the weight of the question settled heavier on his chest. What do you mean by anything? Ifeanyi asked cautiously. Ejike smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. Don't worry. When the time comes, you'll understand. Just be ready. That night, Ifeanyi tossed and turned in his bed. The moonlight spilled through the cracked window, painting shadows across his ceiling. His laptop sat on the table, the screen dark, like an eye watching him. Anything. The word echoed in his head until dawn. The following week, Ejike called Ifeanyi. Ifeanyi, dress up. We are going somewhere tonight. The tone of his voice was different this time, firm, commanding, as though he were no longer just a friend, but a master giving an instruction. Ifeanyi hesitated. He wanted to ask where, but his curiosity was already pulling him by the collar. He had been waiting for this, for something to break the monotony of endless failure. I'll be ready, he said finally. Night fell heavy on the town. The streets were quiet, only broken by the faint rumble of okada's and the shouts of drunken men at a roadside bar. Ejike arrived in his Range Rover, music vibrating through the speakers. He barely said a word as Ifeanyi entered the car. They drove for what felt like hours, out of the familiar parts of town, into narrow roads lined with thick bushes. The night air grew colder, heavier. Ifeanyi could feel his heartbeat climbing into his throat. Ejike, where exactly are we going? He asked. Ejike smiled without looking at him. To meet the man who changed my life. They arrived at a small clearing deep in the bush. At the center stood a mud house with a zinc roof, its walls cracked and patched with red clay. The compound was surrounded by tall trees that swayed in the wind, whispering secrets only they could understand. An old man sat outside, bare-chested, his skin dark and wrinkled like dried leather. His eyes, however, were bright and piercing. He smoked from a long pipe, the smoke curling into the air like thin fingers. This is Baba, Ejike said, stepping out of the car. His voice carried a tone of reverence. Ifeanyi's legs felt weak as he followed. The old man's eyes fixed on him, studying him as though he could see past the flesh into the hidden parts of his soul. You have brought him, Baba said, his voice hoarse but commanding. Yes, Baba. He is ready, Ejike replied. The old man laughed softly, shaking his head. Ready? We shall see. Inside the mud house, the air was thick with the smell of herbs, blood, and smoke. Strange drawings covered the walls, symbols Ifeanyi did not understand. In one corner, a clay pot bubbled on fire, releasing steam that smelled metallic. Baba motioned for Ifeanyi to sit. Young man, Baba began, you want money. Not small money, but money that will make you stand where kings stand. Is that not so? Ifeanyi nodded, his mouth dry. Do you know the price of wealth? Baba asked, leaning forward. Ifeanyi hesitated. He remembered Ejike's warning, the repeated question, are you willing to do anything? Yes, he whispered. Baba smiled, revealing yellow teeth. Good. But you must prove it. The ritual began with chants. Baba sprinkled white powder on the floor, drew circles with chalk, and poured palm oil over a small wooden idol. Ejike watched quietly, his expression unreadable. Then Baba turned to Ifeanyi. Your path is blocked. To unlock it, you must feed the spirit that will carry your destiny. This spirit is hungry, and it eats only one thing, pleasure. Ifeanyi frowned, confused. I don't understand. Baba's eyes gleamed. You must lie with women. Not one, not 10, but many. 50 women, in less than 2 weeks. The word slammed into Ifeanyi like a blow. He blinked rapidly, unsure if he had heard correctly. 50 women. Baba nodded. That is the covenant. With every woman, the spirit grows stronger. But be warned, not every woman will count. Some have already been used by others, and their bodies carry different spirits. If you want to be sure, go beyond 50. Double it if you can. The more, the better. Ifeanyi's stomach turned. The room seemed to spin. Ejak stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. I told you, Ifani. This is the price. This is how men rise. I did it. Look at me now. Do you think money rains from heaven? No. It comes from sacrifice. But this is madness, Ifani whispered. Madness. Ejak scoffed. And what is sanity? Is it sitting in your father's house with an empty stomach? Is it waiting for a government job that will never come? Listen to me, poverty is the real madness. Wealth requires courage. Do this, and you'll never beg again. Ifani's chest tightened. His upbringing screamed against it. The son of a church-going woman, raised on sermons about righteousness and patience. But then his mind flashed to the rejection letters, to the look of disappointment in his father's eyes, to his ex-girlfriend walking away because he could not provide. He clenched his fist. I'll do it, he said, though his voice trembled. Baba nodded approvingly. Good. The spirit accepts your vow. You have 14 days. Begin tomorrow. Ejak drove him back to town in silence. Ifani stared out of the window, his mind a storm. The thought of sleeping with 50 women in 2 weeks seemed impossible, yet Ejak's calm confidence unsettled him. You'll need a base, Ejak finally said. A hotel. Somewhere private, where you can bring them. I'll take care of it. Don't worry about money, I'll fund the start. Just focus on completing it. But how do I even find them? Ejak smirked. You'll see. When the spirit calls, the women will come. Just be ready. The next morning, Ejak booked him a suite in a discreet hotel on the outskirts of town. It was a quiet place, the kind of hotel where nobody asked questions. Ifani checked in, still numb, and sat on the bed staring at the white ceiling. The air conditioner hummed softly. On the bedside table lay a packet of condoms, which Ejak had tossed at him earlier with a grin. This is your new office, Ejak had said. Your battlefield. That evening, the first woman arrived. She was a young student, lured by the promise of quick money. Ifani could barely look at her at first, his guilt clawing at his chest. But Ejak's words echoed in his mind, poverty is the real madness, and he forced himself through it. By the third woman, his hesitation began to fade. By the 10th, he had grown numb. The days blurred together. He barely left the hotel room. Women came and went, some laughing, some silent, some oblivious to the role they played in his desperate chase for wealth. At night, he lay awake, sweating, his body exhausted but his mind restless. Sometimes he thought he saw shadows moving in the room, whispering voices calling through the darkness. Once, he dreamed of Baba's idol standing at the foot of his bed, smiling. After 2 weeks, Ifani had exceeded 50. He had counted 78, but he didn't stop. Fear gnawed at him. What if some of them didn't count? What if he failed the spirit? He pushed himself further, bringing more, until the number passed 100. The morning after the ritual was sealed, Ifani woke up to a strange quietness. The air in his small room seemed charged, as though something invisible had shifted. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his hands, turning them over as though they now carried some unseen power. Ejak's words echoed in his mind, from tomorrow, your hands will attract money like a magnet. He had laughed it off the night before, brushing it aside as another of Ejak's exaggerated promises. But today, his phone rang before sunrise. It was one of his online targets, an elderly woman in California he had been chatting with for weeks. Until now, she had always resisted sending money, despite his crafted stories of hardship. But today her tone had changed. Ifani, I've been thinking about what you told me, she said softly over the call. About your mother being sick. I want to help. His chest tightened. "How much do you need?" she asked. He froze. His fingers trembled as he typed a figure on his calculator, then doubled it, remembering Ajax's boast that once the spirit accepted, greed itself became a weapon. $5,000, he said finally. The line went quiet. He thought she had hung up. Then she sighed. "I'll send it today." Click. The call ended. Ifeanyi stared at his phone in disbelief, then laughed nervously. It worked. By noon, the alert came in. His first real cash out. $5,000, converted into naira through one of Ajax's connections in town. The bundle of notes sat heavy in his backpack, its crisp smell intoxicating. He held it in his hands, shaking. In all his life, he had never seen that much money at once. Ajax arrived later that day, and Ifeanyi dumped the cash on the bed. Ajax grinned. "My boy. Welcome to the League of Men." They celebrated that night, drinking champagne in a nightclub where the lights never seemed to dim. Ifeanyi felt like he was floating, watching the world spin around him in neon colors. Women flocked to their table, drawn by Ajax's presence and the sudden confidence radiating from Ifeanyi. For the first time in his life, he was the center of attention. The money did not stop. In the following weeks, more targets gave in. A businessman in Germany sent $10,000 after Ifeanyi spun a story about needing capital for a contract. A lonely widow wired $7,000 to help him buy medicine. Each transaction came easier than the last, as though the universe itself was conspiring to fill his pockets. The ritual had opened a door, and behind it, money poured like floodwater. Ajax taught him how to launder it through local exchanges, how to spread it out so no one raised suspicion. Ifeanyi learned quickly. Within 3 months, he had made over $50,000. The transformation was immediate. He moved out of his parents' house into a 2-bedroom apartment with marble tiles and glass windows that sparkled in the sun. He bought a sleek Toyota Camry, its engine purring like a beast under his control. His wardrobe changed: Italian shoes, gold chains, designer shirts that hugged his chest. He became unrecognizable to his old friends. At night, he hosted parties in his apartment. Music blared, smoke filled the air, bottles of Hennessy and moat lined the tables. Girls lounged on the couches, laughing, their perfume mixing with the smell of alcohol and sweat. Ifeanyi sat among them like a king, his phone buzzing constantly with new chats, new deals, new money on the way. But even in the height of his glory, shadows lingered. Sometimes, in the middle of laughter, he would hear a faint whisper behind him, a voice calling his name. He would turn, but no one was there. Other times, in the quiet of night, he would dream of Baba's idol, its carved eyes staring at him, its smile widening. He always woke drenched in sweat, his chest pounding. Yet by morning, the money was enough to silence the fear. His mother noticed the change. At first, she was happy, relieved that her son was finally doing well. He gave her envelopes of cash, bought her wrappers and jewelry, paid off some debts. She thanked God daily, believing it was an answered prayer. But as weeks turned to months, she grew uneasy. "You don't go to church anymore," she said one Sunday, watching him adjust his gold wristwatch before heading out. "Mama, I'm busy. Work doesn't give me time." "What kind of work?" she pressed, suspicion lining her tone. He forced a smile. "Online business." But she saw the hollowness in his eyes, the way he avoided her gaze. Something about her son was changing, and she did not like it. One night, as Ifeanyi drove back from a club, the streets blurred in his vision. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, sweat dripping down his face. He felt weak, as though his strength was leaking out of him. He parked by the roadside, gasping for breath. The night air was cool, but his body burned with fever. In the rearview mirror, for a split second, he saw the idol's face instead of his own. He screamed, slamming the mirror with his fist until it cracked. The next morning, he woke up in his apartment, unable to get out of bed. His body ached, his skin pale, his eyes heavy. No amount of money could lift him. Ejike visited, his expression calm but unreadable. "It has started," he said simply. "What do you mean?" Ifeanyi rasped. "You think the spirit gives for free? You've taken from it. Now it takes from you. Balance must be kept." Fear gripped Ifeanyi's chest. "Am I dying?" Ejike shrugged. "Not if you continue to feed it. But if you stop, the spirit will collect everything, your money, your strength, your life." Ifeanyi's eyes widened. "You didn't tell me this before." Ejike leaned closer, his voice sharp. "You think wealth comes without blood. You said you were ready to do anything. Now prove it." That night, alone in his room, Ifeanyi wept. The bundles of cash on his table mocked him. The car keys glittered under the lamp, reminding him of the price he had paid. He thought of his mother's prayers, his father's disappointment, his own dreams of a better life. The pains grew sharper. The headaches didn't go away. His vision sometimes blurred. There were days he would collapse on his luxurious bed, unable to stand, his body shaking like a leaf caught in the wind. His mother noticed first. "Ifeanyi, your eyes, they are sinking. You are not looking well." He forced a smile, brushing her worry aside. "Mama, I'm fine. Just stress. Business stress. Don't worry, I'll be okay." But he wasn't okay. Within weeks, his skin became pale. His frame, once filled with the confidence of wealth, thinned out. Clothes that once hugged him perfectly now looked loose. The laughter in his party started sounding forced, his voice weaker, his presence dimmer. Doctors ran tests. Every kind of test. Blood work, scans, x-rays. They poked, prodded, and examined. But every result came back clean. Nothing was wrong with him, at least, nothing science could find. Yet Ifeanyi was wasting away. His mother grew frantic. She watched her son, her pride, the boy who once dreamed of lifting the family's name, slowly shrink before her eyes. The money he showered on her no longer mattered. The cars, the house, the endless gifts, they meant nothing compared to the sight of him coughing violently in the middle of the night, his body cowed in pain. One evening, after another failed visit to the hospital, she sat at his bedside. He lay there, sweat drenching his expensive silk pajamas, his breath shallow, his eyes staring at the ceiling like he could see something no one else could. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "God, please, whatever this is, don't take my son. Don't take my Ifeanyi." That night, she made a decision. The next morning, without telling him, she arranged for them to see a pastor. She had heard of this man before, a servant of God whose prayers revealed things that no test or machine could detect. Ifeanyi resisted at first. He didn't want to go. He didn't believe in pastors anymore, wealth had numbed that part of him. But he was too weak to fight her, too drained to argue. And so, with his mother's support, he was taken to the pastor's church. It was a small building, modest compared to the mansions Ifeanyi had grown used to. The walls were bare, the floor concrete, the air filled with the faint scent of anointing oil. Members of the congregation eyed them as they entered, the flashy car outside had already announced their presence. The pastor was waiting. He was an older man, his face lined with wisdom, his eyes piercing yet calm. He didn't smile when he saw Ifeanyi. He only gestured for them to sit. Ifeanyi's mother spoke first, her voice trembling. "Man of God, please help us. My son is sick. We have gone to every hospital, every doctor. They cannot find what is wrong with him. Please, pray for him. Let God heal him." The pastor didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stood slowly, walked toward Ifeanyi, and placed his hand on his shoulder. At the touch, Ifeanyi flinched. A shiver ran down his spine, as though something inside him had recognized the contact. The pastor closed his eyes. For a long moment, there was silence, only the sound of Ifoni's labored breathing filling the room. Then the pastor began to pray, his voice low at first, then stronger, words pouring out in a steady rhythm. Suddenly, he stopped. His eyes snapped open, and he looked directly at Ifoni's mother. The room felt colder. "Woman," the pastor said, his voice heavy, "your son's sickness is not ordinary. It is not of the flesh. It is not from God." Her hands trembled. "Man of God, what do you mean?" The pastor's gaze shifted to Ifoni, who was staring at the ground, avoiding eye contact. Then the pastor spoke words that seemed to cut through the air like a blade. "This sickness is a result of something he did. Something he gave himself to, in the pursuit of money." The silence that followed was suffocating. Ifoni's mother gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. Her eyes widened, tears already welling up. She turned slowly to look at her son, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Ifoni, what have you done?" The pastor didn't stop. His tone was firm, unyielding, each word striking like thunder. He made a covenant. A covenant of darkness. The wealth he has been enjoying, it came with a price. And now, the price is being collected. His body is failing because of the path he chose.